Hello and welcome to the Bluff Creek Project Podcast. I'm Tate Hieronymus and I'm your host. And today I'm joined by Seth Breedlove. How are you, Seth?
Good. How are you, man?
Good. Sorry for that weird intro. I mean, it was kind of lame, I guess. Should I just do it over again?
No, don't do it. I think that was perfect.
It was simple and to the point, right?
Yeah. That's the best way to go.
I think so. And, this is like the first time in quite a few years we've talked again, because I met you at the Big Foot Bonanza in San Francisco, and I think were you showing your film there or something? I can't remember.
We showed a few of ours both years that I was there. So yeah, when we met, I think that was at the one at the Balboa, right? That wasn't the second year where they had to shift it.
It was the second year.
Oh, it was the second year.
I was at both though.
Okay. Yeah, the second year where you showed yours, we did like the Flatwoods Monster and something else. But the first year we got to do like Invasion was there. We showed Beast of Whitehall.
Yep.
We showed, I can't remember what else. Danny Perez got confused about which movie he was watching and blasted one of them. And when I tried to correct him, he got mad at me. So,
oh Lord, that's so funny. It sounds about right too.
Yeah.
I remember like when I showed my film, I was like so nervous, and Kai said something on Jeremiah's podcast. He's like, "Yeah, dude, Tate was so nervous he went across the store to the liquor store." Or the street to the liquor store and got some beer. And I remember I was asking you pointers on stuff too. And
had you showed it anywhere before then, like to a live audience? That was before. It wasn't even really. Was it finished when you showed it there? Yeah,
no,
that's what I thought.
It wasn't even finished. I finished it now. I mean, I added narration and I trimmed it down to 15 minutes because it was like 30 minutes when I played it there.
Okay, and you ended with a song. Because I remember watching the movie and there was like some sort of song at the end. I'm like, there's no way he got the rights to use that song. What was the song that you had in your credits?
Those were just actually some friends of mine from Des Moines that I grew up with. Are
you sure?
Yeah.
I swear, like they're friggin' good then. Because I remember when you played it, I was like, that's some morning radio stuff there.
Yeah, the band. The band was called Half Loves. They're from, I can't remember. They're from out of the. They're in the Iowa area. I think they're in Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, I think. But yeah, I use some of their music in that film, and
that's cool. If you have musician friends, that's always a win. That's how Brandon, who does our film scores, that's how we got to working together. Was we just kind of became buddies, and then he offered to do our scores. I think music is like insanely important to film.
I think so too. I like a good soundtrack for a film. It makes it or breaks it sometimes, in my opinion. I mean, but yeah, I filmed the whole thing on iPhone, and I remember asking you and Kyle, like, should I tell people that I did it? And he was like, no. And then after the film, he's like, well, by the way, that was all shot on iPhone. I'm like, okay. But,
Did you edit it on what did you edit on?
iMovie on iPhone.
Yeah, man. That's the stuff right there.
Yeah.
I talk about this all the time. All the recreations in the Mothman of Point Pleasant, which is probably like arguably our biggest film, were shot on an iPhone. So like it's totally fine to use whatever you have available, because that's what we do.
Okay, so you said you used iPhone before. What other cameras do you use? Are you using like those big cameras or kind of like those smaller compact cameras?
I mean, it just depends on the project. When we get into recreations, we use stuff based on the look we're trying to achieve. Like I bought a Polaroid One Step today, actually, because we're doing a found footage look for the Rougarou recreations. So I'm buying like all kind of cameras for that. So we've got some 8mm, like Super 8 we're going to be using for that. we'll be shooting on some really crappy like camcorders because we're trying to achieve different eras of found footage. So there's going to be like a VHS look and an 8mm look and like still photos and stuff like that. When it comes to the movies, these days we're shooting entirely on Sony. I own an FX3, which is like the new little like cinema camera. I just bought that, and then we have two A7S3s, and then we have an A7 III, and then we have three AX33s, which are the little like Sony handy cams. Those have like night vision, and then we have probably like a dozen generic little crappy camcorders laying around that we use anytime we need like a bunch of like night vision stuff. But I mean, for a while I was trying to shoot on Blackmagic because I really like the workflow of like the Pocket Cinema camera, but it's so bad in low light. I just got burned out on fighting the low light because we just don't tend to work in environments that you can really control the lighting on very often, other than like interviews. So we're all Sony now, but none of them are big cameras. Sometimes we'll rent, like we rented when we shot Rougarou, we rented the FX6, which is a little bigger than like the A7S3s. But honestly, it kind of annoyed me. By like day 2, I was sick of lugging it around, and I didn't feel like the image out of it was that much better than what we can get out of the A7S3s. So at this point, I think the smaller the better for the way we work, especially on the trail of projects.
And it makes hauling that stuff a lot easier, especially when you're traveling to like other places and have to fly somewhere too.
Yeah, it all just boils down to the workflow. When we do our legend movies, so like the Howl of the Rougarou or Bray Road Beast, that kind of movie, we rent a car, usually something huge, sometimes a van, and we can lug as much equipment as we need, and that would include lighting and all that kind of stuff. When we do on the trail of, it's less we don't typically have as much gear. Sometimes we're flying, so we don't have the ability to take a lot of lights and stuff like that. We just finished shooting on the trail of the Lake Michigan Mothman, which we shot over the weekend, and we had 2 lights on that, but we mostly just shot run and gun style with unlike, actually we were actually on tripods on that one, but they're just those little like Benro travel tripods. And we just, every shoot's different, but the on the trail lives tend to be way more scaled back than the legend movies. The legend movies are all about trying to get that like really cinematic look and just dial in the specific look of the movie. So we spend a lot more time on what we're taking and that kind of thing. But when it comes to on the trail of, it's supposed to embrace our roots more, which is that really like run and gun guerrilla style.
And like, so I want to talk about lighting in a film because that's important. Do you try to do more natural lighting from the trail of, and then more like fixed lighting for legend?
I mean, on the trail of Bigfoot, we didn't even have lighting for anybody. There's an interview in that movie with Robert Robinson that was shot in a hallway at CryptidCon where we didn't even have overhead lighting. We had lighting coming out of a bathroom. And I had to, the shutter speed on that interview is terrible because I had it cranked, trying to get it so we could actually see his face. So on like the very early on the trail of stuff, we didn't even have lights. On the trail of UFOs, we didn't use lights much. And then on the trail of Champ, I would have to ask Alex what he did with that. But I don't think he had a lot of lighting either. We started using lighting with on the trail of UFOs Dark Sky, the one that's coming up. But even like on the trail of Bigfoot the Journey, we had lighting, but it was little like on camera lights. We just set them however we could, to make it work. But the UFOs is different because UFOs we're trying to cross what we're maybe a little bit what we do with the movies, like the legend movies, with what we do with On the Trail of. So it's more like cinematic looking, but it can get into the like really gritty look too. But yeah, On the Trail of isn't supposed to have a ton of lighting and light stands and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I wanted to do On the Trail of because I hate lighting. And I hate sound and all that stuff that takes forever to really dial in. And so when we started doing On the Trail of, it was to get back to like the way we did things in the early days with like Boggy Creek and Beast of Whitehall, because we had lighting on both those movies. We didn't tend to use it much, and if we did, we had no idea what we were doing, because it was mostly like at that point I was kind of like still our director of photography, especially Beast of Whitehall. And when Zach came on board with Boggy Creek Monster, none of us knew what we were doing. Like if you watch the behind the scenes, Zach and I are like cussing each other out and on the verge of getting into a fight half the time. Like it's because we had no clue what we were doing and the stress was so high. And we've got it now to where it's still super stressful, but we've all done it so many times that kind of like when we show up for an interview or whatever, everyone just goes into, like setup mode pretty much immediately. I mean, we just had some really intense kind of not intense, but like stressful setups in Chicago because we were in a hotel and we only really had one angle in the hotel room that we could shoot as a backdrop. And the people that were coming showed up with like an entourage. So there was like a dozen people crammed into my room while we're trying to shoot these really important interviews. And we only had these like specific setups we could use. And everyone was kind of stressed. But I mean, it all came together pretty quickly. And Dave, as a filmmaker, I don't know, you might be familiar with Dave. Dave Knopp started working with us last November. When we made On the Trail of UFOs Dark Sky, he runs a DIY YouTube channel called Knop Top, or Create Stuff. It's something like that. His name on YouTube, if you look up Knop Top, you'll find him. It's weird too. Dave, in the very early days of film, when I got into filmmaking, I made a PVC shoulder rig. Because I couldn't afford gear like when we were first starting because I had a regular job and like my wife didn't necessarily want me dumping thousands of dollars into filmmaking. Yeah. So I made myself this like shoulder rig, this PVC shoulder rig, and it was based on this guy Dave Knopp's shoulder rig design that he did like a tutorial on his YouTube channel. And so I watched it and I made the rig. And a couple months, maybe even like a year later, a buddy of mine was putting in a floor at my house and he had a guy with him named Aaron Gaskin, and Aaron was like helping him put in the floor, and Aaron and I started talking about filmmaking, and Aaron starts telling me about how he's got this friend named Dave Knopp who runs a YouTube channel. And I was like, no freaking way. So Dave and I became friends. Now Dave's working on SDM projects, but Dave and Zach work really well together, especially in those like intense kind of lighting situations where we have to figure out something on the fly. But I mean, I can do it. End of the day, like anyone can make movies. The storytelling aspect of it is a little different, but anyone can go out and film a movie. Literally anyone can do it. And it doesn't take a great deal of brains to do, which is why I'm able to do it. And so like the biggest thing I think we've found, or I found, is being able to handle those like really stressful situations and how thinking on the fly, like how to light it, how to handle the sound. The sound is like such a huge aspect of film, and especially documentary film, because it's really hard to fight the elements and all the stuff that we have to deal with especially when we're doing On the Trail of, because that's like us in the woods or us in uncontrolled environments, just trying to film the audio from an interview. And you can't control a lot of what goes on in those situations. So we went from like the very early days of STM, where like some of the audio in the early stuff is just horrendous, to where we are today, where I feel like even when the audio isn't great, like even when we're fighting those element issues, we can come out of it sounding fine, like at least passable. Like we did an interview last year for Mark of the Bellwitch, in a school, like this schoolroom is this massive auditorium in a school, but it had crazy echo. And then for some reason, I forgot to turn off the overhead fans. So they were like clanking and there's all this noise. And I ended up kind of like making it a part of the scene. And like Brandon literally scored the song that went under that scene so that the tempo of the fans rocking matched up with the music. So it actually sounds, so you can't tell that that's what's going on. He made it sound like those fans are part of the music, which is pretty wild. But
that's like genius.
Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff, like just over time you pick up all those little quirks, but you wouldn't do that if you quit. So that's why my thing is always like, just friggin' stick with it if you get into it, because it's not a overnight success story with filmmaking for anybody that I know, especially guys that are making movies about Bigfoot. And that's why every year you see, 20 guys start making movies about Bigfoot or UFOs or whatever. And then the next year, those guys have moved on to something else. It's because like the work that goes into doing this is unbelievable. And there's no overnight success stories for anybody. And even the success that you can achieve, like compared to what you could achieve in making movies about like basketball or girls or something, would it's like a lot. There's a big disparity between the two. Like I could be making movies about other stuff and probably be more successful.
Yeah, I think like sports films, if you're doing documentaries, are gonna be a little more fruitful in the long run. Yeah. But it's so true. And like when I met you, you guys had some stuff still out and you guys were still working on stuff, and even now. And it's like I can't keep up, man. It's like so much cool stuff coming out. It's insane.
We work we work around the clock. So like I haven't had any extended time off since sometime maybe like last year, like last summer, where I took like a week off or something like that. So you just got to work like crazy. Our problem this year has been, so we launched our YouTube membership thing back in November, and originally I wasn't supposed to have much involvement with that. Aaron came to work on pretty much specifically creating stuff for that. But launching it was really difficult, and I ended up spending the first like 3 months of that, like, so that would be like November through January working on that. So I didn't start editing On the Trail of Bigfoot: The Journey until the very end of last year, and then into this year. So we were way behind. Like, so our schedule has been a nightmare. And that's just because we launched that. So where we're at right now is we have basically like the Mark of the Bellwitch just went wide. It came out last December, but that was like a totally independent release, and it got picked up after the fact by 1091. Then 1091 picked up On the Trail of Bigfoot: The Journey, and now they've picked up 4 more titles. So we have 6 coming out this year. And 5 of those are 2021 productions. So that means in terms of like movies that we're shooting and releasing this year, 5 of them are like literally being worked on this year. And typically that isn't common, and we'll right the ship by the end of the year in terms of like getting some stuff's already filmed. So when we go into next year, we're editing some stuff that was already shot, this year or whatever. But basically between March and September 30th, we'll have shot 4 different movies and edited 4 different movies. So And one of those, On the Trail of the Lake Michigan Mothman, is actually being edited by Dave Knopp. So I've got 3 that I'll have edited since March, but 4 total for 2021, which seems like a lot. But the way I break it down is like On the Trail of UFOs season 1 was 4.5 hours of content. And I edited all of that myself between December of 2019 and February of 2020. So that's 4.5 hours. And if I'm editing 4 movies this year, those 4 movies alone will come close to being the same length as just On the Trail of UFO season 1. And after I did that, I also put out The Mark of the Bell Witch and The Mothman Legacy. So I edited probably like 7 hours of film last year. So we can handle it. What I want to do, it's funny because like my wife and like Dave and some other people I've talked to recently are like, are we going to slow down in 2022? And I'm like, I'm actually trying to figure out if we can up the amount of productions we're doing from year to year, just because, well, for one thing, it's hard to stay alive as a business, as an independent production company. We don't take money from investors. The only money that comes into SDM to make the movies comes in from the Kickstarter. So our investors, quote unquote, are the people that back the Kickstarter. And then the money that we make throughout the year goes back into doing other productions. So just to stay alive, you're always trying to like figure out what the next step is and like where can we go from here. One of those things, that we hit upon in the last year was YouTube. We really wanted to start expanding our YouTube stuff. So we've got Paranormal Unexplained. We've got Alex's new series, Beyond the Trail. And then there's some other stuff. On the Trail of Hauntings is going up on there. So we're always trying to figure out, like how can we expand the company. But one thing I've always wanted to do with SDM is I want it to be a fully like autonomous production house where there's always stuff coming out. And Trauma.
I think so.
So it's like this, they made like really bad B movies. They still do. But it was like a constant stream of films from them. And it was all overseen by one guy, Lloyd Kaufman, who actually got to be on a panel with a couple of years ago at Horror Hound. But I always look at that as like an interesting model because I don't want to do that, but I like that they put out so much content, so many films over the course of like such a short period of time. What I want to do is get SDM to the point where it's like everything that we're putting out is still, not everything, but a lot of what we're putting out is still a Seth Breedlove film where I'm there for the story conceptualization. I'm there to shoot the recreations. I'm there for all the production stuff. And then I do the story cuts and make sure everything still is a good story. Because one thing I think I'm halfway decent at it is story. And that just comes from growing up around books and parents that owned a bookstore and being obsessed with reading and writing as a kid and all that kind of stuff. And people respond to what I do as a storyteller. The other end of that would be to do more stuff like what we're doing with Alex, where Alex is like, we pay for what he's doing and he goes out and makes a project for us. And then, we get to put that out and it still is high quality enough to where, like I feel like it maintains the quality people expect from SDM. But I would love to do like 10 projects in 2022. I don't think we will, but like it'd be cool to, if we did technically, I guess we did 5 this year if you discount Mark of the Bell Witch, since that technically came out last year. But if we could do 5 this year with all that's gone on, I feel like we should be able to do 6 or 7 next year.
Good grief, that'd be awesome. And it's funny, I'm going to be up with Alex and he's going to go with Eli Watson up to Bluff Creek. I'm going to show him around the area. And then he's going to do some filming up there and I'm going to do some filming with him. And we're going to be in Portland, Oregon as well. So that's going to be exciting stuff.
Yeah, man. He's he's got that filmmaker bug that I appreciate, which is like he just friggin' does it himself. Like he doesn't. I don't know. Alex is so level. It's funny because when you look at the dude, he's kind of like intimidating because he's got that huge beard and you just don't know what he's gonna do.
Yeah.
But I've honestly, I don't think I've seen Alex lose his temper, and I've been in some pretty stressful situations with the dude. He's always kind of just like on this even keel. And so for me, I mean, that's the opposite of me. I'm usually stressing out and freaking out over everything. I'm like the most neurotic person I know. But Alex just figures out how to make it work. Like I always think of that when he made Champ, like he lost his crew on the day where he was supposed to go film. And I always thought that was so cool that he just like said, screw it, and went and made it anyway. Like, even though he didn't have crew, he just figured out a way to make it work. And that's a lot of like, when it comes to documentary filmmaking, I think that's a lot of what you're dealing with, is just trying to figure out how to make those situations work. Because this isn't, when we make recreations, we tend to like rent a location and we go to that location. We've got lighting and you've got sound. Like we had a sound guy on Mark of the Bell Witch, and there's all this stuff, and it's, it's a little chaotic, but you still have control over the location. When you make something like On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Journey, you don't have control over anything. Like you have no control over the weather, where you're, like you climb a mountain and you film that climb. You don't know what's going to happen. Like one of our crew on the climb up this mountain had 3 gallstones and a hernia. And so like, there's stuff that just happens that you're not that you don't know how to deal with. And it all comes down to how you respond to those situations. And it's not like people say filmmaking now, and it's like this, and I've worked with people that do this. It's like this sexy thing, supposedly, that like we're doing, oh man, I'm a filmmaker. And, it'd be great if you could show that mindset that like they have, which is like that commercial kind of mindset where filmmaking is lights, camera, action, and like a catering truck, and just being wearing like a blazer on set and that kind of stuff. Cut from that to like the actual reality, which is like we're in New York and Andy Matsky actually accidentally ate like raw chicken and is throwing up in the hotel at night, because that's the kind of stuff that happens. It's not like documentary filmmaking is not the hipster version of filmmaking. Especially not what we're doing. But I mean, it's the best. There's nothing else I would rather do. I mean, that's interesting too. We just had a talk about this over the weekend because I was with Zach, filming that movie, and I've known Zach since we were kids. Zach worked in commercial filmmaking for a little while. He lived out in LA. He went to Full Sail. He moved out to LA. He worked in it. He hated it and like turned around and came back to Ohio. And he kind of like, I don't know how to put it. He's still interested in filmmaking. He still likes film. He is no longer really interested in working in any kind of controlled filmmaking environment. And that's always kind of like, that's worried me, because I love filmmaking more than anything I've ever done. But if I got to a point where I was doing it solely because I had to make money doing it, like if I was solely, I have to pay my bills, so we have to do this, I think I'd just quit and go back to like medical billing, which I hate, because at least I know I hate that, but it's a job I hate. I don't want to come to hate filmmaking because I have to make a living doing it. And I think that's the danger of like the people I know who do filmmaking because they think they're going to get like rich and famous off of it. Like the drive is wrong. And you can come to hate something you love if your reason for doing it is wrong. And
yeah, like for me, it's like, I know I'm not going to make any money doing it, but I just like having a good time, and everybody can get a camera, like you said, and make a film. So like, why not just do it for fun? And what comes out of it?
The thing of it is though, like, don't you don't have to have that attitude either. You can make money at it. Like, just
well,
keep
like I think of it like, just if money comes, that's awesome. I will be happy to do it. But in like the meantime, I just love doing it. It's just like, it's just fun to do, and I just want to do it, and just make content, and whatever comes of it is a bonus. I can't argue with that. I can't complain.
Yeah, and like that's how I was like early on when we started STM. I can remember my right between making Minerva and making Beast of Whitehall, I went and researched cameras and like try to figure out what camera to buy for myself, because I didn't shoot Minerva. It was shot by the other guys that I worked on it with. And I didn't like that lack of control, because I had a very definitive idea for how I wanted the movie to look. And so like I went and bought a camera so I could teach myself how to make the movies I wanted to make. And I can remember after I got that camera, like I'd wake up at 5 a.m. and go to like Cuyahoga Valley National Park with that camera just to shoot stuff as the sun was coming up, so I could figure out exposure and lighting and like, just shoot little short films of nature and stuff just by myself, because I loved the act of making something so much. And I would hate to get to a point where like that part of this goes away, where it becomes so tedious trying to crank stuff out. Like even now, we're up against crazy deadlines. The Howl of the Rougarou is due at 1091 on July 15th. And then after that, September 15th, On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Discovery is due. And then September 30th, On the Trail of the Lake Michigan Mothman is due. So we still have those 3 titles to kind of finish up this year. And I haven't even really gotten into the edit on Rougarou, and I've got about 6 weeks. So like, I feel that deadline, but at the same time, it's like, that's not that big of a deal. We did Invasion on Chestnut Ridge in like 5 weeks. I mean, heck, I edited and shot all of the Mark of the Bell Witch between the beginning of September 2020 and maybe like October 15th. That was like a 6-week edit. So that kind of thing.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I was going to say, like, I know filming and editing can be tedious, but what do you enjoy? In a weird way, I love to edit the footage I have. I find that therapeutic and fun. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, that's my thing about what we do has always been calling yourself a director is like, that's part of that whole hipster like mindset. Like, oh, he's the director, and then you think of like Christopher Nolan. So you're like, but for me, like documentary directing is done in the edit. So so that's where I mean, that's my favorite. I'd hesitate to say that's my favorite part of it, but it's the most important part of my role in the process. And I love the challenges of it. Like I guess my biggest problem has become, I have a wife and kid, and I'll bring that home with me a lot of the time. Not literally the work, but I'll come home from the office and I'll find myself like just totally like thinking through story points through the night instead of like spending enough time with my kid or something, or being all in for my child. So that's been one of the things I'm struggling with lately. But that's like, my absolute favorite part of filmmaking is going out with a camera and shooting B-roll, and like the exploration that comes with that. The interview process, I stress out. Like that's where I stress the heck out. Like when we have to interview people, because I'm not a social person. In fact, I'm like super anxiety ridden when I'm in any kind of social situation. So that part doesn't exactly play to my strengths, but I love exploring and filming things and places. So that's my absolute favorite part of it. But the editing is a close second, because I do, like, even today I got into looking at our Rougarou footage and I was like, holy crap. Like we went on a boat ride down in the Atchafalaya Bayou at sunset. This guy took us out, And I mean, some of the footage is just like hauntingly beautiful. And I hadn't looked at it in a few months. So when I'm looking at it, I don't even remember shooting any of it. And that part's really exciting too, just like looking at what you shot and figuring the story out is a lot of fun. I mean, it's fun and it's also super stressful. Like it's not stressful. It's very, I guess, challenging. I don't get stressed, but it really like challenges my thinking because I don't like to tell stories the same way twice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always trying to figure out different devices to move a story forward. So like, and sometimes it really works well and I'm proud of it. Like Terror in the Skies. That movie is broken down into 3 sections. Each section is devoted to a different geographic part of the state of Illinois. So you've got the first like 20 minutes is Southern Illinois, and that takes you through Alton and all that kind of stuff. And then it moves into the middle part of Illinois, and that's all the Lawndale attack and all that. And then it goes to Chicago and Northern Illinois with the Mothman stuff. And each of those parts of Illinois look very different and are very different. And that's mentioned in the interview at the beginning of the movie. So it like plays into one of the interviews. And that was all totally by accident. And we and like I put that all together in the edit. Like that was never planned that way. But then there's other movies I do that I try to find like interesting ways of telling the story. And after the fact, I don't think it worked. Like Mothman Legacy, I didn't like the way I moved the story on that one. And so but I just love that process of like finding how to tell the story and how all the disparate pieces go together. I don't plan stuff in advance. So like, I mean, the secret of our movies is that when we go to film, there's usually a bigger picture like that I'm aware of, like as far as what is this movie actually about? Like, that's the most important question as a filmmaker I think you can ask yourself is like, what is my movie actually about? And, like the Rougarou movie isn't about this dog monster. It's about the disappearing landscapes of Southern Louisiana. And, like Mothman Legacy is about the way that story is formed and how narratives are constructed out of real events. And most of our movies tend to revolve around story in some way, but that's a really important question to ask yourself when you get into like the pre-production process, because your movie shouldn't just be about what it's about. It should be about something bigger.
Yeah.
And I forget where I was going with that now. It was going to be great point. Anyway, I have no idea what I was talking about.
Hey, neither do I. It happens all the time with me. And it's funny. I feel like when I plan something out, like, I mean, I have an idea what I want it to be, but when I plan it, it doesn't work out the way.
Oh yeah. That's the thing. Exactly. That's why you don't like when I wrote this all comes from the way I wrote for the newspaper. When I would write, when I was a reporter, I would go into a story with kind of an idea of what that story was, and it never ended up being what I thought that story was. Like I'd get a call from my editor, and he'd be like, "I need you to go do this story. This is what it's about." And I'd get there, and it wouldn't be about that at all. It'd be about something else entirely. And so, the planning stuff out just doesn't work. I've got Heather Mosier has come on board in the last like year as my I called her my research assistant in the beginning, but now I mean she's not an assistant. She's like basically my research partner. And having her on board has helped me a lot because she does a lot of the preliminary stuff, like finding witnesses and putting people together for me. And then that frees me up to think more creatively about like what we're actually doing creatively with a story. But I still don't plan anymore. I mean, like it just doesn't work out whenever I do. Like I can't even think. There's one movie we made where we had put a plan in place, and that's what we did. And that was Momo, which is one of my favorite SDM movies and one of my favorite projects that we made. But that's a different story too, because Momo is so driven by the narrative sections of that movie that you couldn't have made that movie as like a seat of your pants documentary and had it succeed to like play off of those narrative portions of the movie. So, and even Momo, the documentary parts didn't go exactly as planned. The story of that movie didn't play out exactly as we'd planned. I think we even had, like even as a movie, I think like Lyle's segments were way more over the top in my head when we were writing them, but he didn't really want to play it that way. So like we ended up, a little more like those sections are a little more tame than what I would have envisioned when it was all coming together.
Yeah, I hate planning. I kind of get ideas that I want to do, but I don't plan it. Like, okay, I have this idea. I think that would be cool. And then this idea. Then when I get all those ideas filmed, then I can add it together kind of the way I wanted to.
Yes.
It might work out.
Definitely. No, that's how it is. That's how it should be. So you're saying like you have like creative ideas, but you don't think so far ahead that you're already thinking of how it all works together. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Because like
that's the same way with me.
Yeah, it's like I can't. Like I have an idea, but if I plan it in sequence how it should go, it's not going to end up the way I want it.
It won't, and I don't know why that is, but I've never had anything go the way, like episode 5 of On the Trail of UFOs opens with this scene where like Shannon breaks the fourth wall, and it's like she's driving across the desert or something, and then all of a sudden she like says something about, wait a minute, why am I driving across the desert? Something like that. And then it like rewinds, which I call my like Ferris Bueller moment. But but like that idea came to me like while I was sitting in church one morning. So it's like this stuff doesn't play out the way everyone seems to think. I don't know that I've talked to a documentary filmmaker who knew what they were doing. So I'm wondering, just as a documentary filmmaker, I'm wondering if any filmmaker knows what they're doing. Because I mean, like I know from watching what goes on these big Hollywood productions, a lot of it is dictated by like a bunch of guys in suits in a room. Mm-hmm. And then the creative types have to like try to make that work within the context of what they want to do with the project. And that's what I love about what I do. There's no one to tell us what we have to do with SDM. And that's why you end up with projects like Momo. Like Momo's so weird. If 5 years ago, I would have hated the idea of what we did with Momo. But 5 years ago, there was no huge sprawling subgenre of like cryptid paranormal independent documentaries like there is today. Like when we made Minerva, I could count on 2 hands the independent, maybe one hand, like the independent documentaries about like Bigfoot and the paranormal that were on Amazon Prime. There was Southern Fried Bigfoot, there was Eyes of the Mothman was out. I'm going to start saying this and then I'm going to forget something and insult somebody. But I mean, like, it just wasn't a subgenre. So when we made Momo, it's as much a spoof of what we created as it is anything. It's like, it's a spoof of our own stuff. It's a parody of our own stuff. It's a complete, I mean, it was like, to me, it was a scorched earth approach to like what's on the Travel Channel. I mean, there's things I did in that movie that were done specifically to blast like certain films. There's a scene with Lyle walking down some railroad tracks where I superimposed his own head in slow-mo moving over the image of him walking down the railroad tracks. That's supposed to be like a very like obvious parody of a scene in a UFO documentary that recently came out that I don't want to say the name, but I mean, like, that was our parody of that filmmaker. I couldn't have done that 5 years ago. So the whole, like, that whole genre has changed just since we made Minerva in 2015. And that's been kind of crazy to see as well. And then the other thing that's crazy, I know I totally got off track here because we were talking about like planning.
It's all good.
The other thing that's been kind of crazy is when I think I just lost my train of thought again. Damn it. Hold on, it'll come to me. When we made Minerva, like that platform, so Amazon was like the only platform you could get on, right? Because it was open to filmmakers. It opened up to filmmakers in 2016. And at that point, anyone could upload their movie. Now, since then, they've completely gone the other direction. Now, any documentary, any nonfiction filmmaking of any kind is no longer welcome on the platform if it's independent. So you can't upload your movies directly to Amazon anymore. But what's interesting to me is, despite that fact, someone on my timeline today on Facebook posted about how some Travel Channel show they were on was the most viewed thing ever put on Travel Channel. And I was like, well, that's got to be pretty crazy numbers. And then I saw the numbers and it was 1.4 million. Our least viewed episode of On the Trail of UFOs is 2.3 million. Our least viewed. So my least viewed episode of my little $40,000 UFO miniseries has almost double the views of the most viewed thing ever on Travel Channel. And that cracks me up too, because like even over the weekend, we were interviewing people who kept asking, what network is this going to be on? And I'm like, it's not going to be on a network. It's going to be like streaming online or whatever. And they're like, oh, is there any way you think you'll get it on a network? And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to be on a network.
Yeah.
We have the audience for this kind of stuff for like streaming media is so much larger, but there's still this archaic idea that somehow there's a larger audience waiting for you on network television. And it's like, it's not at all true. No. Like you can make, like Justin Chernopesky can go make a Bigfoot documentary, stick it up on YouTube and have over 1 million views and get more views than like Survivor Man Bigfoot. And that's what I feel like people need to hear, those numbers, like those comparative numbers, because Justin's out there just doing his own thing. But because it's not on the Travel Channel, people have this idea that, oh, it's not as successful or the audience isn't as big. But no, actually, like the audience for our stuff is probably bigger than what's on network television.
Yeah, and I think you lose your creative control when you give it to networks too.
Yeah, all creative control. I've had those meetings. I've had probably 7 or 8 meetings with boardrooms of people about what they want to do with like a small town monster show, and it's like it's the opposite of everything we started STM to do. Like they always want it to be us, like, you know, like running around with night vision cameras, which we do, but it's within the context of what we want to do, you know,
yeah,
in that film or in that series or whatever. Like we do On the Trail of Hauntings, which is a ghost hunting show, except nothing ever happens. We never find ghosts. And most of the show is like Aaron making wiener jokes and us eating like bad wraps while driving to a location, or like it's the antithesis of everything that a network would want out of a ghost hunting show. Like Santino, the guy that directs it all, he says it's like comedians in cars getting coffee mixed with like ghost adventures.
That's hilarious. That's like perfect. And you know, I think I prefer when independent filmmakers are on YouTube versus a network. And that's why I like independent musicians who write their own music and don't have a label or assigned, because it's all there, what they want to do and how they want to do it. Nobody can tell them what to do.
Yeah,
which I think is important for the creative process in general.
Yeah, I mean, when we signed with 1091 last year, the phrase that I used was, I don't want this to be a distribution deal. I want this to be a partnership. Because like, I don't want the distribution deal gets dicey, because a lot of times the distributor can have a say in like what they're distributing. And 1091's always been great about just distributing what we create. Now, I mean, the other thing about that is if 1091 hadn't come along when they did last year, there would not be a Small Town Monsters today. Like
Oh,
on the
wow.
Trail of UFOs released in late March of 2020, right as the coronavirus hit. It was the most expensive thing we'd ever done by double. So Terror in the Skies was the most expensive thing up to that point. And then On the Trail of UFOs came out, and it cost me over $40,000 to make it. And it was a stunning flop. When it came out, yeah, I mean, that's like something I've been very quiet about, but STM movies haven't made money upon release since 2019 when Terror in the Skies. That was the last movie that came out where it was like, oh, hey, we're on the bestseller list and like we're near the top and we're making a bunch of money on rentals and purchases. Ever since then, our income has been pretty much dependent on streaming media. So like either Prime or like the Samsung or unidentified network, like something like that. That's where we have to make the money to keep doing this. UFOs we thought would be huge because it's episodic. It's coming out. It's about UFOs. We've never made anything about UFOs before. It's kind of like a big topic at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it flops in this huge way. And we're like, okay, well, we might go under. And then we had an offer from 1091. And so 1091 bolstered us at least through last year. And then what happened is once On the Trail of UFOs made it to Prime, it like exploded. Over the course of like 12 weeks, it had like 4.5 million views. And that just kept going up. Like it's still getting about 1 million views every 12 weeks. So the amount of views just on that one series is insane. And that's why I said like it's more views than we would get on Travel Channel. Like there's more eyes on our little UFO documentaries, independent documentary series than there are on any of the shows that people think are like huge hits on like Travel.
Uh-huh. I can think of a few right now on Travel that probably aren't as huge as what you guys are putting out.
Yeah.
But like, so when you're making a film, or what do you see anything on Travel Channel or anything? What do you think of when things are hoaxed? Do you try to not do that or add anything later that you wanted to get what you couldn't get in the field?
You mean like, do we add anything in post or?
Yeah, like if something did happen, because I know there's kind of a stigma about that and you can't control everything in the field, like when you're filming, but do you add anything in post that did happen? But
I mean, well, I guess that depends. Like I've never added anything into a movie that even if it did happen, what I've done, I mean, obviously we do recreations. So like On the Trail of UFOs Dark Sky, there's a lot of UFO recreations. So yes, we do recreations, but as far as adding in elements like in post that we might have actually experienced, I've never done it. I don't think I would appreciate that being done. So like, yeah, I know. I mean, like my thing is networks I don't even know that they hide the fact that like most of what they're doing is like BS, right? So like, I mean, it's, not only do I not see the point, but I actually go out of my way to debunk anything that does happen on camera as it happens. So there's going to be something that comes out that happened on our Lake Michigan Mothman shoot. And I'm holding it because it's pretty crazy. But we went out of our way to make sure we cover all the angles as to what we filmed could actually be. But we did film something in Chicago that's pretty wild that people will see, eventually. And it was happened, and I sent it to people almost immediately after it happened. So like we were doing everything we could to sort of debunk it even as it happened, just because the other problem is I've been accused of maybe not hoaxing, but like guerrilla marketing twice already. When the Chicago Mothman stuff actually kicked off in 2017, the MUFON Illinois state director, Sam Maranto, told people that they should be asking me if I was somehow behind this as guerrilla marketing for the Mothman of Point Pleasant. I know this because I interviewed Sam this past weekend and he told me. So like I'm already aware, and I was asked about that back in 2017. And I've always said I'm not that smart, and I also don't have the means to get it to blow up the way it did in 2017. The other time was that there was a picture of a dog walking on its hind legs off of Bray Road that came out around the same time that we were filming the Bray Road Beast. And I got a phone call from a Milwaukee television station, and the news reporter that talked to me was straight up accusing me of hoaxing it to promote our movie. So I've already dealt with that twice. So I'm very like conscious of not having to, I just don't want to deal with it. Like I almost would rather not film anything because I don't want to hear that I hoaxed whatever was there. You know, It's one thing if like we're filming something that might be something completely like I guess I filmed some eye shining on the trail of Bigfoot, the first series, right? Like I was down in Oklahoma and I filmed this eye shine. I don't know that I state explicitly in that it is Bigfoot, but if someone else could tell me what that is, I would be happy to hear it. But what I would have hated is if I had gone in and like someone was like, okay, he must have added these eyes in post or something. I have no interest in doing that to begin with. You know, like it doesn't play into what our whole reason for being is.
And yeah, when in doing that is not truthful storytelling at all in itself.
Yeah, it kind of runs counter to the entire idea of documentary. There's it's one thing to do recreations. It's funny because the recreations I try to create are basically to take what the witnesses say and then recreate it on screen so people can sort of put themselves in that witness's shoes, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's supposed to be the reason for doing a recreation. What I notice on television is they take what a witness says, completely re-edit it to make it sound like they're saying something they didn't, and then go way over the top with the recreation, you know? So I don't do that. And then when it comes to like, if you have a story reason for doing it, like Momo is a movie about movies from the 70s. And so it's supposed to be over the top. The movie is about how visual media tends to take real events and turn them into something they aren't. It's in that way, it's almost a parody of what's on like the Travel Channel. So if you're using it, you know, for a very specific story or artistic reason, I think it's okay as well.
Yeah, that I agree. But yeah, like if you're filming something and you actually hear something, don't add that in post because it's not true. It's not truthful. Right. If you hear it, you don't. If you hear it, you hear it. If you don't, you don't. Yeah.
What's funny is sometimes you'll have things happen and you don't hear it, and then you find it in post. So that's something that people will find when they watch On the Trail of Bigfoot, the Discovery later this year. There was some stuff that we caught on audio, or that the Olympic Project caught on audio, that we never actually heard with our own ears in the moment when it happens.
Isn't that crazy? I have a friend that like got some audio, and he didn't hear it, but like when he was looking at it, he could hear it. Like he could see the wavelengths, and like it doesn't make sense how that works.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's crazy.
So I got to ask about your is that Dark Knight Rises poster?
Yeah. So I did window cleaning in California. Did that professionally. And then we cleaned a gentleman's windows who worked like for Hollywood doing like movie posters from premieres and stuff. Mm-hmm. And we asked him, like, he did the Dark Knight posters and stuff when Dark Knight Rises.
Oh, sweet.
So he gave us like a couple small rare Dark Knight posters for the movie, and he signed it on the back.
That's super cool. That's my favorite of Nolan's Batman movies. I know that's like everyone says Dark Knight, but Dark Knight Rises, like, yeah, it elicited more of an emotional response from me.
Okay, so Dark Knight Rises was probably the movie I saw the most in theaters. And to be fair, I lived in Mexico at the time, so it was like really cheap. So I saw like 8-9 times.
Yeah.
It was super cheap to go, but it was super good. But yeah, Dark Knight for me is probably my favorite. Then it's Rises.
Yeah, I think Dark Knight's the better movie, but as far as like which is my favorite, it's Dark Knight Rises. I think it like pulls me in a little more. I don't know. And I really love Bane. Like I know the voice is so ridiculous, but it's still like I love that character and the way he's played.
How hard do you think Vin Diesel could have played Bane?
No, I don't want to see. I don't think I want to see that. They wouldn't have had to do any voice editing though. There would have been no need for voice work in post.
That's so funny and true. Dark Knight Rises is like that poster was really cool. He got that poster.
I can't see it. There's like a glare on it from where I'm sitting, so I can't quite tell what it is. Oh, dude, I've never even seen. Oh, okay. I can't tell who did that though. I want to know who the artist is. So you met that guy?
Yeah. So I think he gets the pictures from the studios or whoever does the photography.
Yeah.
And then he does all the editing to the picture and then makes the posters out of it for like the premieres and what you see like on the movie billboard things at like the movie theater and all that. So he did that.
Almost looks like Alex Maleev, who did. Alex used to do artwork for like the Daredevil comic when Brian Michael Bendis was writing it and stuff, but I don't know if that's who it is, but that's what it reminds me of.
I'll have to look. When I find out, I'll text you and let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a super cool poster.
Yeah, it is.
Something of my prize, although I got a bunch of other stuff everywhere here. It's my little closet / studio / museum, whatever. It is what it is.
That's how STMHQ is.
it's the best way to live. Oh, I have this like golf game in here too.
Oh, heck yeah, dude. Golden Tee, yeah, where you have to do that run up the ball thing. Yeah, that's great.
I would hate when my fingers get pinched between the ball and like the plastic. Yeah. Classic. So I think we've been recording for about an hour, I believe. I could be wrong. Don't quote me. But before we end up on things, we ask this to all of our guests because obviously it's the Bluff Creek Project Podcast. What is your opinions on the legitimacy of the Patterson Gimlin film? Do you think it could be? Come on,
man! Don't do this to me.
I have to. Do you think it could be real? Or do you think it could be fake?
Do I think it could be real? Yes, I think it could be real. Do I think it is real? No. So like, yeah, I guess the reason I just have too many questions when I watch it. So I mean, and there's other reasons. I mean, it's the second best Bigfoot film, purported Bigfoot film. Because my favorite's the Freeman footage. I just think the Freeman footage just looks so friggin' believable to me. Like what's in the Freeman footage, I can't explain. To my eyes, the PGF looks fake upon initial viewing, and then with subsequent views you start to formulate questions about it, and then it takes on a life of its own. It's kind of weird in that way. I don't think there's another piece of paranormal anything, in this weird world that does what the PGF does, where it's like your initial thoughts on that film will in no way reference where you're at in like 5 years with it. So right now I'm kind of on the skeptical end, but who knows where I'll be in 5 years with it.
Oh, so another Dark Knight PGF reference, the famous 352 frame in the Patterson Gimlin film. There's a picture of it in the Dark Knight movie.
Is it?
In the beginning, yeah.
Where at?
The scene was before the parking garage scene where like Batman stops like all the guys from. It's in the beginning of the movie. It's the parking garage scene. It's before that.
Okay.
I think it's before or after that. After the bank robbery, I think before the parking garage scene. He like throws something in the paper bin basket, and then it shows like Abraham Lincoln and a Patterson Gimlin picture right there.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, so I was like, check it out. And I saw that on IMAX. So
Yeah.
it's like huge and in your face. I'm like, dude, that's awesome.
Wow. That's crazy. I had no idea.
So yeah, if there's a little Easter egg for Bigfoot people.
Yeah.
But Seth, thank you for coming on and taking some time out of your day, man. I enjoyed this, and hopefully you had a good time too.
Yeah, man. Anytime. Let me know sometime when I'm not in the middle of doing like 6 different projects, and I'll come on and we'll talk for like 5 hours.
I totally am so down for that. That'd be fun.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. And until next week, we're the Bluff Creek Project Podcast.